So, in thinking about ratios, right, we know that it's a comparison. It's a comparison between two things, right? So, in this case, in this sort of example here, we're comparing basketballs and we're comparing baseballs. Two fabulous sport options. And what we want to do is we want to write the comparison of how many baseballs there are to how many basketballs there are in fraction form or as a ratio, express it as that comparison. So we're going to say, okay, well, simple enough. I'm going to count up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 basketballs, right? And I'm then going to count up that there are 1, 2, 3, 4 baseballs. So the comparison, the ratio of baseballs to basketballs is a 4 to 6 ratio. When you are using ratios or creating them, you want to remember too to simplify if you can. So here we can use EVA, right? Both of them are even numbers. We can chop both in half. So this can become 2/3. So the ratio of baseballs to basketballs in its simplest form is a 2 to 3 ratio. This is what we call a part to part ratio because we have part of the objects here are basketballs and part of the objects here that we're comparing are baseballs, right? If you wanted to do, so this is called part, P-A-R-T, to part, okay? There's another type of ratio that we could explore here, which is called a part to whole comparison. And in that, it's pretty much just what it sounds like, right? You're now comparing not all the parts to the parts. We're now comparing the part to the whole. So we might say, how many basketballs are there compared to total amounts of balls? Okay. So in that case, we would say, well, there are still 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 basketballs, right? But this time we want to say out of the whole, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 total balls. So this is a part to whole relationship. Again, it can be reduced or simplified. They're both even. So we could turn this into cutting them both in half, a 3/5 ratio. It can be written in fraction form. It can also be written as a 3/2/5 comparison. It can also be written as a 3/2/5 ratio, okay? And the same can be true over here for our part to part comparison. We could write it with a fraction like we did. We could write it with a colon, or we could write it with the word to. If you wanted to, there will be some scenarios where you want to turn it into a decimal. Again, you can do that by remembering that the fraction bar is really just a division sign. So you can set it up as 2, 2, 3, 2 divided by 3, 2 divided by 3, and you can then convert it by using division into a decimal. So these are ratios thinking about part to part, basketballs, baseballs, or part to whole, right? Basketballs to the whole quantity of balls. And what you want to really remember, right, is that things can change if you change the order. So if you wanted to have in this case, we have baseballs to basketballs, it's a 4 to 6 ratio. But if you did not label and you just kind of willy nilly put some numbers out there, you might end up with the opposite, right? You might end up actually with a 6 to 4 ratio, and you might say, oh, it's a 6 to 4 ratio. Well, that's very different, right? This becomes a 3 to 2 ratio, which ends up having a whole, right? You could actually turn this into a mixed number and say it's 1.5 in reduced form, right? The ratio then of basketballs to baseballs is 1.5. So the order that you put the numbers that you're comparing very much matters, and labels very much matter. So this is thinking about ratios.